Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
All right, welcome once again to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. I am, as always, your host, Duck, and today is Photoshop edition, and we're going to be doing something a little bit special today. I'm going to be walking through a kind of like a typical headshot editing process that I use when I shoot headshots. It's not high-end photo retouching, portrait retouching. It's kind of like a down and dirty, make the person look really, really good without spending, an hour retouching an image. Okay. I had the pleasure of photographing a young lady who gave me permission to go ahead and use her image for today. Her name's Victoria, and so we'll be using that. Okay, so we're going to be going through a couple different things. All right, one is kind of the workflow that I've kind of perfected for myself. As anything with Photoshop, take the lessons that you learn here and modify them to your needs. Okay, I want to give you at least a basic understanding of the fundamentals. That way you can understand the why behind something. But as you know, with Photoshop, there are more ways to do a task than there are, stars in the sky, it seems. It's not just one technique that solves a specific problem. You'll find that there are multiple techniques. Hopefully, I'll give you something to start off with if you are not familiar with like a blemish removal or dodge and burn. Hopefully I'll give you some tools to start with, or maybe you already have some tools already in your toolbox, and maybe I'm going to show you something a little bit different that you didn't realize before, that just kind of expands on your current knowledge. All right, as always, at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, all right. Let me go ahead and switch over to my desktop. And what I have here is, as always, I start and end my processes in Lightroom. All right, I use Lightroom when I'm shooting. So when I took the photos of this young lady, I was tethered to the camera here in the studio. Everything got fed into Lightroom. What we are seeing here are the final choices that were picked, and what ended up happening was that there were a couple of little outtakes. That's these two. I'll show you this one. Oh, come on. This one and this one. These were kind of just fun shots. There were captures in between serious moments, and I just kind of gave these to her because I thought they were kind of cute. Then we got into these four. Here are the ones that she really, really liked. She wasn't sure which ones she was going to finally settle on. So what I did is I did some light editing. I sent all four to her as a preview, and she settled on the first one and the last one as her final keepers. And that's what we ended up, or that's what I ended up delivering to her. All right. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this one, and we're going to develop it in my standard headshot photo editing in Photoshop. So, like I said, I start everything in Lightroom. Then I take it to Photoshop to do a bunch of things that Lightroom can't handle, and then I bring it back into Lightroom in order to generate the final deliverable product. Okay, so in this case, one of the things that you can do if you're unsure of how to start a process is if you go right here in the basics tab. Let's see, where's my, in the basics tab, about a third of the way, there's a little button that says auto. If you click on that, what it's going to do is it's going to kind of analyze the image, and it's going to make certain adjustments based on the Adobe AI that analyzes the image and says, okay, well, you know, in order to make it look good, we need to, you know, in this case, open up the shadows a little bit, you know, take the highlights up, or the whites up a little bit. It boosted the vibrance a little bit on me, all right, and you can see all these changes that it did, okay? These are just suggestions that Lightroom creates for you based on its artificial intelligence. You don't have to take it. Again, it's, you know, salt and pepper to taste. It's what appeals to you as an artist. A lot of this is going to be very subjective, all right? So what I do may not necessarily be what you eventually end up doing. I'm just going to give you the tools to do your own thing, okay? But that being said, there are certain, I don't like saying the word rules, because a lot of people think that, you know, rules they're like hard set. They're more like guidelines. And a lot of the guidelines are based on visual standards that we've come to recognize that appeal to the majority of our audiences. All right. For example, our eyes tend to go towards areas of brightness first. So obviously the most important part of the subject we want to be properly lit so that it attracts our attention to it. In a portrait, obviously, that is the mask of the face. You know, and everything else, you know, we want to kind of help it so that it brings the focus in. All right. So in this case, you know, we chose a very light gray background. So one of the things that we want is we want to make sure that the focus of attention is being brought in, okay, to the mask of the face. All right, so we want this part to be the brightest. Now, the brightest is relative, obvious to everything else in the image. All right, and it doesn't necessarily mean it has to glow with light in relation to everything else. The brightness and darkness of the different elements can be very subtle, okay? And that doesn't necessarily mean that is the exact rule. There are exceptions to the rule. It doesn't apply in this particular case, but there are exceptions, okay? All right, so as with anything, the way I normally teach people is take a look at the image, analyze it, try to discover what is wrong with the image, all right? That way you know where to go first and fix it, okay? So obviously, one of the tricks is the squint test, okay? If you haven't learned this trick, it's one that you should keep in your back pocket because it applies across the board to every photograph you ever take. And the way you do it is you kind of just give yourself a little bit distance from the image. And if you squint your eyes a little bit to kind of blur the details, right, what happens is it turns everything into just shapes, all right? And the colors kind of get a little washed out and blended together because it's so fuzzy. And at that point, what you're doing is you're seeing these blocks of shapes with the different values of luminosity. All right. So if you squint your eye a little bit, you can see that her face is pretty much already there as being the brightest part of the image. Okay. And we also see that there's not much difference in luminosity between her face and the background. All right. So one of the things that we might consider is to go ahead and darken. All right. Actually, let me darken. All right. These edges. All right. So maybe darken these edges. Right. Okay. The light is also a little bit flat, so I might want to shape her face a little bit. Okay, so we're going to do some dodge and burn. Dodge and burn. All right. Okay, and we also see that there's this kind of like V shape to her blouse that kind of brings the attention down and out. It's creating this arrow, all right? So I want something that will stop and bring the eye back up, all right? Hopefully you guys can see that once I point it out, okay? This is what I call grounding the image. A lot of times if the luminosity is too bright towards the bottom, it doesn't allow the image to have like that weighted, seated feeling that, you know, it has substance, all right? And it tends to give it like a little bit of an airy feeling. There are times when that is appropriate, but for a headshot or a portrait, that's very, very rarely appropriate. We want something that's going to give the subject a little bit of weight, a little bit of substance, and that grounded feeling. Okay, and as part of the process, all right, it's going to allow the eye to kind of come down and bounce back up. All right, I don't know if I explained that well enough for you, but you'll see what I mean when we get there. Okay, so we want to correct for that. Everything else is just going to be kind of minor little things that get done to pretty much every portrait that I do. And one of that is correct any blemishes or flaws in the skin. Flaws, all right? And the rule of thumb here is if it's something that is temporary, you know, like a pimple, or maybe they have a little scratch from a cat or a dog, and you know that's eventually going to heal. They were unlucky to have that blemish during the photo session. Go ahead and get rid of it, okay? But if it's something that is part of their character, then obviously you want to keep it. But in that sense, there are certain things that we want to diminish, all right? And we'll cover that a little bit more detail when we get into it, all right? All right, so right off the bat, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 things that we really need to tackle, all right off the bat, just by looking at the image. Everybody sees this? Yes? Okay.
What do you mean by dodge and burn?
Okay, we'll get there. All right,
Okay.
we'll get there. Okay. All right. But in a quick definition, dodging and burning means lightening and darkening very specific parts of the image in order to control how we direct the eye. Okay. All right. Let me get rid of those. Okay. So, like I said, I start in Photoshop in Lightroom. Now, there are a lot of great tools that we can use in Lightroom to accomplish a lot of this, but I find that some of these are handled easier in Photoshop than they are in Lightroom, simply because the ease of masking in Photoshop as compared to Lightroom. Now, over the past year, Lightroom has made a lot of great advances in its masking capabilities, but it's still a little bit clunky, right? For quick, dirty fixes, it's great, right? If you take your time and refine it properly, you can really get to do, really awesome jobs right in Lightroom. But I don't want to spend, like I mentioned before, I don't want to spend an hour retouching something that I can do in, let's say, 15 minutes, right? Because in the end, time is money, and there are better things to do with our time, okay? So one of the things that I do want to do is kind of bring our eye in. And for that, we have the great tool of a vignette. Now I have some vignette. Let's see. What do we want? Let's see. Where are? I can't find them now. Oh, here we go. Lightroom comes with a few vignettes. All right. Light, medium, and heavy. Okay. And if you hover over these, all right, right here, okay, you'll see right below defaults, vignette, none, light, medium, and heavy, okay. If you hover over them, it'll give you a preview of what it's doing, all right. And heavy's probably a little bit too much. I kind of like that medium, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and there we go. Okay, so right off the bat, you can see how just that little, darkening of the corners kind of helps bring our eye in. Okay, and this will be something that I do before exporting it to Photoshop. All right. The other thing that I will do here, which I didn't show, is you might want to adjust your crop if you need to. You might want to also do some color correction. All right. So for the color correction, I know that my background that I used is a neutral light gray. So I can use that background to sample my color. All right. Somebody wants me at this hour, forget it. All right, the way to do that is in the basics tab, right where it says color, there's a little eyedropper. Okay, and if you click on that eyedropper and we bring it over to our image, and you want to pick something that is supposed to be a neutral color, all right, meaning no color cast, all right. Once you click on it, it will adjust your color temperature appropriately. Okay. All right. All right. So these are things that, like I said, you can do ahead of time. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Photoshop. All right. Because I've kind of already opened up that file in Photoshop in preparation for today's class. And as you can see, I have not done anything here in Photoshop. All right, if you can see, it's just the background layer, and that's about it. All right, and if you notice, I did not apply that vignette. Okay, we can do that later if we need to. Okay, all right. So one of the things that you have to consider. Oh, wait a minute. I should probably explain how to get this from Lightroom into Photoshop. Okay. One of the things that I found is it's always easier to have Photoshop already open beforehand. Okay. Because when you send from Lightroom to Photoshop, if Photoshop is not open, Lightroom needs to go ahead and open Photoshop, and usually it takes a little bit of a while before it loads up into Photoshop. So typically I'll have Lightroom open, and if I know I'm going to send it over to Photoshop, I'll go ahead and open Photoshop. It just makes transferring over from Lightroom to Photoshop that much faster. Okay. Once you have your image selected in Lightroom, one of the easiest ways, you could either right click, and about a third of the way down, it'll say edit in. And the first one there, it's going to say edit in Adobe Photoshop. Okay. Another way you can do it is you can do Control E or Command E if you're on a Mac. And that's just a shortcut way using the keyboard to send the image over to Photoshop. That's usually the way I do it, but I love my shortcut keys. Makes things so much easier. Okay. Or you can do, let's see, where I don't use the menu all that much. File, where is it? Okay, photo, edit in, and then edit in Adobe Photoshop. Okay, so you can go right to the menu. I find it easier to either just right click on the photo, all right, or use the command Control E to send it over. Okay. So once it opens up in Photoshop, this is what you should get. Okay. All right. Now, one of the things that I've done to make my job easier when I am retouching is I have created a lot of my workflow as actions. All right, so if we open up the actions tab here, all right, and if you don't see your actions tab, just go to Windows. All right, click on Windows. The second one down here in the list is actions. Make sure that's checked. Okay, and then you'll have this little icon here that's like the play button. Okay, click on that, and all your actions will be there. All right, now I want to take a second to kind of explain my setup here, all right, so that in case you want to replicate something like this, you can do so, all right? If you'll notice, I have, let's see, where it says Duck's retouching actions, okay? You'll notice that I have a bunch of actions, and then right next to it, you're going to see a shortcut key. All right. When you create your action, you can assign it a shortcut. All right. So what I did is you can see they're kind of in order. All right. There's really no order to this. These are just the ones that I use the most often. I kind of made it in order. All right. Now, the reason I did this is because I use a tool. Let's see if I can reach it into the camera. Okay, I use a tool called the Elgato Stream Deck. Okay, all it is a little device that has buttons that you can program, right? And what I did is I programmed a bunch of these buttons with these actions. So rather than going to my actions tab, coming down, selecting the action that I want to use, and then clicking the play button down at the bottom, I just hit the button on my Stream Deck and it takes care of all of that automatically. Now, obviously not everybody has a Stream Deck, all right? Not everybody needs it, okay? But the nice thing about shortcut keys is that once you learn the shortcut keys, it's easy to just hit the shortcuts on your keyboard and it automatically launches into the action without you having to go through that whole, you know, picking your action, okay? Minor, this is something that, you know, it's more advanced if you want to, all right? The other thing I want to point out, and again, I don't want to confuse things too early, but I want you to be aware that, you know, you have several options, is the default view for the actions panel is this one right here, where it lists all the actions, all right, and you can organize them in whatever way you want. As you can see, I have folders, so I can collapse and open my folders, and you can organize them however way you want. So I keep all my retouching actions in a retouching folder, okay? And I can just go down the list as I need them and activate them as, you know, I need them for my retouching, all right? So this is one way. But if you go to the little hamburger menu on the corner of that panel, all right, it's going to open up a drop down. You're going to see that the first one says button mode, all right, and if you click on that, you're going to notice that it changes the format of your list. It's no longer a list, it is a series of buttons, and all you have to do is just press any one of these and it will automatically launch your action, all right? The only thing, and I wish Photoshop would probably do something with this, there's really no way of organizing it, all right? It just lists all your buttons right down to the list here, okay? All right, so some people like the button method. I don't like it because it's too easy to accidentally hit one of those and it'll automatically launch it. And if you didn't want that action, now you have to go back and delete all those layers that it created. So I'm not too comfortable with this. I normally keep it off the button mode. But like I said, I have my little, you know, my little Stream Deck that I use that kind of makes things easier for me. Okay. All right. Any questions about that aspect so far? No? Okay. All right. Although I have all those actions, all right, and I probably will be launching some of the actions, I want you to understand what those actions do and how I built them. So we're going to break them down as we get into it. Okay. So there's a certain order that I take my portraits from the initial view to the finished view. All right. And each step I do in a very specific order in order to not mess myself up. Okay. One of the things that is important to keep track of is the order of your layers when you start building layers in Photoshop. Because you're going to find that if your layer order is not properly organized, you're going to find that Photoshop does really, really strange things. All right. And I'll see if I can purposely create some problems to show you what I mean. Okay. The other thing is certain tools that you'll be using. Who just signed in? Michael? Certain tools that you'll be using, you have to pay attention to the tool settings in order for you not to make unnecessary errors. And again, I'll show you that when we get to it. All right. So the first step that I do is I want to remove any blemishes on the portrait. Okay. In Lightroom, that's where I quote unquote normalize the image. That's the color correction. That's the, cropping. If there's a horizon that I need to straighten out, I'll do it there. Okay. So I'll normalize it in Lightroom before I bring it into Photoshop. So I don't have to do that step in Photoshop. I can get right into editing. All right. So the first step is I'm going to get rid of any blemishes. And for that, there are several tools. All right. There's the spot healing tool. There's the clone stamp tool. Okay. And those two are probably the ones that you're going to be using the most. Okay. But the trick here is you want to make sure that as you're working on your image, that you are working as non-destructively as possible. Meaning you do not want to modify any of the pixels of the original image. In case you make a mistake, you can always undo it if you're working non-destructively. Okay? If you work destructively and you make a mistake, all right, hopefully if you catch it right away, you can undo it. But imagine if you're 10, 20, 50 steps into retouching and you realize you messed something up. There's no undoing that. You have to go and kind of scrap everything and start fresh. And that's just a waste of time. Okay? All right. There's a couple schools of thought here. All right. Some people will go ahead and make a duplicate of their background image. All right. And just keep a second one on hand. All right. For my particular workflow, I don't need that because one, the image that I'm going to be using has been generated from Lightroom. So if I need to get back to that image, I already know it's in Lightroom. I can just regenerate a new one. Okay. Secondly, the way that I work non-destructively, I'm not touching that original image. So I don't need to make a duplicate because I'm not touching it anyway. So, okay. All right. So what I want to do is right now, I want to tackle any blemishes, any physical errors with this image. And for me, the blemishes are going to fall into two categories. And we kind of touched on it earlier. The first one is blemishes that, we want to correct because they are not part of the person. All right. These are things, like I said, pimples, any acne, all right, any red spots, any scratches. With clothing, there's a piece of fuzz, or maybe there's a thread that's hanging out that, you didn't catch. We want to get rid of that. and things like that. Those are things that we want to permanently remove and completely hide. Okay. The other one are certain features that are part of the person, but we kind of want to minimize them, right? We don't want to really make them prominent, okay? And this gets into the psychology of how we view a person in real life and how we view them when we're looking at a photograph. All right, so right now you're seeing me in a video, all right? It's as if I were standing right in front of you. There's movement, you're listening to my conversation. Typically when we are in a conversation with somebody, we're looking at them in the eye. We're not really studying every little bit of them, all right? So there are certain flaws to a person's physiology that kind of get lost when we're face to face with a person, all right? Because we're not concentrating on that part of them, okay? When we are studying a photograph, it is a still image. There's nothing there really to hold our attention specifically to the eye. We're drawn initially to the eyes, and then we wander through the image. So we have time to kind of analyze everything about the person, including all their flaws. Okay? And these are the flaws that when we're speaking to them, we don't notice. We never notice them until we actually see them frozen in time in a photograph. So while yes, those are part of who they are, we want to kind of minimize it. We want to give them less emphasis as if we were talking to them, face to face, real life. All right. Because during that face to face, real life conversation, we're not dwelling on those flaws. We hardly even notice a lot of those flaws. All right. So we have to mechanically minimize those flaws. All right. So that's going to require a slightly different way of handling those blemishes than the ones that we want to completely remove. Does this make sense to you guys? Okay. All right. So for this, I need 2 layers. All right. One for the flaws that I need to remove and one for the flaws that I want to minimize. Okay. And these are just going to be straight up empty layers. Okay. And I'm going to label the first one blemishes. Okay. And the second one, I name, it's going to sound bad. All right. Keep in mind, all right, this workflow is for you as a photo retoucher, not to share with your client. Okay. All right. So typically the flaws that I want to minimize tend to be a lot of the wrinkles. Okay. She's a young girl. All right. But even young people have wrinkles. All right. So we want to minimize those for the portrait. So I named them wrinkles, although more than what's going to end up happening is that there's going to be probably other things that go into that besides just wrinkles. Okay. And we'll cover that in a little bit. Okay. So right off the bat, two layers, empty layers. Okay. Now we can go ahead and zoom in. All right. And start looking for flaws. All right. And you can see that she has really great skin. All right. There's not much that you would consider flaws. All right. There's a little spot here on her neck, but that's a mole. That's part of her, who she is. All right. It's not a temporary flaw. Okay. All right. So now, let me just zoom out a little bit. Okay. So we look at it, it says, well, you know, there's really nothing there to correct for. All right. So what I want to do is I want to make this part of the job a little bit easier. So for this, I want to create what's called a check layer. Now, a check layer is a temporary adjustment that is used to facilitate a certain task, that it's used for that specific task, and then once the task is done, you get rid of it. All right. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to accent any flaws that may be on the skin. All right. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to create a black and white adjustment layer. All right. Black and white adjustment layer. Okay. And what this does, it's going to convert everything to black and white. But what we want to do is we want to highlight any imperfections in the skin. All right. Now, it doesn't matter what ethnicity the person is. Everybody has reds, oranges, and yellows in their skin. Okay. So if we look at the lineup here in the properties tab here, we're going to see reds and yellows are the first two. Then we go greens, blues, cyans, magentas, right? If we take the reds and we darken up our reds, what happens is we're going to notice that some of the imperfections now become highlighted. All right. We can see a lot of these spots on the skin that we hadn't noticed before. All right, look at parts of the nose right here. Okay. If I toggle that off, can you see those imperfections? No. All right, they're very well hidden. Okay, but they're there. Okay. So what this layer does is it allows us to visually see these problem areas a little bit better. Okay. And like I said, it's a temporary one. So once we're done editing, we can get rid of this and it's done its job. Okay. So now with that layer active, I can go to my blemishes. All right. I can go ahead and zoom in. I will select my, in this case, my spot healing brush tool. All right, which is right here, spot healing. All right. And I can just go ahead and anything that I see that really stands out as being a blemish, all right, I'm going to just go ahead and draw on it and it magically corrects. All right. Now, earlier I said you have to be careful when you select a tool to make sure that the tool settings are appropriately set. Okay. And that is the case with this particular tool. If we look at the top, we're going to see that there is a type. All right. In this case, we want content aware. So we want the AI to help us in making our corrections. All right. We have create texture and proximity match. All right. They don't work as well, in my opinion. All right. And more importantly, you're going to see this one that says sample all layers. Sample all layers. And it's a checkbox. You could either check it on or check it off. Make sure it's on. Now, this particular tool has a check mark that's either all layers or just the current layer. Now, obviously, the current layer is a blank layer that we started off, so we can't sample from that layer because there's nothing on that layer. All right? We want to be able to sample from that layer and below. Okay? And this is where it gets a little tricky, and I wish Photoshop would fix this. Some of their other tools, they give you the option current layer, current and below, or all layers. They give you that option. This one they don't. It's either current layer or all layers. All right. Now, because we are at the beginning of our workflow, it doesn't really matter. We want to make sure that it's on all layers. It wants to sample all the layers. But later on, when we start adding layers above it, we have to be careful. If we revisit this layer, we have to be careful that we turn off the layers above so that those don't affect what we do on this layer. All right. And I'll try to give you an example later on, but just keep that in mind. Okay. So sample all layers, we just go in and we're going to go ahead and clean up the skin a little bit. All right. And take your time. All right. Now, I am working with a tablet. All right. So it makes touching up very, very easy. All right. There's a little red spot there, some red spots here. Okay. So I can go very, very quickly through this and make my my corrections. Okay. It might be a little bit slower if you're using a mouse. Take your time, you know, go click, click, click. The easiest way is to just size the brush size accordingly, and then just right click with the mouse to drop a point, and it will get rid of those. All right. So if you have a larger blemish, you might want to make your brush a little bit, and then just make clicks, click, click, click. All right. And it'll do short work. All right.
Hey, Doc,
Yes.
I'm glad you said don't take out something like the mole, because I have taken things off of people that if it were on my face, I would want to take it off. But in one case, I was shooting at an event. There was a well-known person there, and I got rid of something. And then I went to watch TV the next day, and that thing is there. It's like, oh, I should not have done that.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's a rule of thumb. If you decide that you want to get into portrait photography or headshots, if you have a question about it, go ahead and ask the person. All right. But ask them, you know, in a polite and respectful way. Is there anything that you would like to see me remove in post-processing or correct in post-processing? All right. So they may have a mold that they don't like and that they normally try to cover up with makeup, but obviously, you know, makeup can only hide so much that a photograph captures. So they may ask you to go ahead and remove it. At that point, because you have permission, get rid of it. All right. But otherwise, it is part of who they are, you know, and often what happens if you go ahead and remove it, when they look at the image, they're going to go, it's not quite me. All right. And they may not notice it right away. All right. Or they may, you know, but the last thing you don't want them to do is say, that's not me. Okay.
Same thing with eyes and teeth. Brightening eyes.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that in a little bit. Okay. So I'm not going to go too crazy with the retouching here, but hopefully you get the gist of how what we want to do is just target those very minor imperfections that, we don't want pulling our eye into. Okay. All right. And like I said, she's got very, very good skin to begin with. So in this particular case, there's not a lot of work that's involved. All right. So I've taken care of the face. I am now going to go onto the clothing, and I want to look for, dust bunnies. Okay. We want to get rid of, anything, loose threads, fuzz that gets caught on people's clothing. In this case, she has a very dark coat. All right. And, fluff and, dryer lint and things like that kind of really just stick out like a sore thumb. So we want to make sure we get rid of it. I had one person from another session, she wore a red blouse, and at some point she must have spilled something, either water or soda. There were little spots. When you look at it, the difference between the red where the spot was and the red of the clothing is very, very minor. All right. And it's not until I put the check layer on that those spots came, imagine looking at a sky and then suddenly seeing all the sensor spots. It was that obvious. Okay. Now, the thing is, had I not applied this check layer, I may have missed it. All right. And the problem is that once you find them, you can't unsee them. All right. As subtle as they were there. All right. And some people can spot them a lot easier than others. But the one thing you don't want is them coming back to you and say, how come you didn't get rid of the spots on my shirt? All right. So a check layer really helps. Okay. All right. So, we'll look for, stray threads. All right. Oh, here's the stray thread right there. Okay. And then the other thing I'm going to look at is stray hair that really, sticks out from her head. Okay. Now, you can go crazy fixing hair on a person's portrait. Okay. Stray hair, it's a bane for all portrait photographers. All right. And the one thing you want to do is you want to try to control as much of it in studio at the moment, have them brush as best they can. You can mist the hair a little bit to just kind of help it sit properly. All right. But if there are a lot of wild, crazy strands sticking out, this is the time where you want to go ahead and use the spot healing or the clone stamp tool to kind of get those under control. All right. I'm not going to go too crazy, obviously, because it's not that distracting. Okay. When we actually look at some of these, like here, all right, I might want to, bring it down. There are other techniques to put this under control. All right. I'm not going to bother going into those, but you can use the liquefy tool in Photoshop to kind of push some of that in a little bit more. All right. But because there's a gradient to my background, that liquefy tool is probably going to create more problems than it's worth. So I'm going to avoid using the liquefy And if I want, I'll just go ahead and reduce some of that just by using the clone stamp tool, okay? All right, now I'm doing a really lousy job here just to control it. I would actually be a little bit more careful, okay? All right. Any questions so far? All right. So at this point, I've gotten rid of all the blemishes that I want permanently removed. The next step is I want to go to the blemishes or the areas that I want to minimize, okay? And these typically tend to be wrinkles, laugh lines. Oops, what'd I do? Okay, wrinkles, laugh lines. All right, very dark moles I will reduce. I don't want to get rid of them. I do want to reduce them down a little bit, okay? All right, so here's this technique. This technique is not the best way to do it, okay? Not the best way to do it, but it's a quick and dirty way of doing it that gets the results that I need for the product that I'm delivering. Okay, hopefully that puts a little context. All right, so I'm going to make sure that I am on my wrinkles layer. Okay, I'm going to select, once again, I'm going to select my spot healing brush. Okay, and I'm going to literally paint over all these wrinkles, and I want the AI to remove them completely. All right, now you're probably wondering why I'm doing that. All right, and there's a method to the madness. Okay, I want to get rid of all those. All right, these little ones up in the forehead. All right, we're going to get rid of those. Okay. All right, laugh lines here, we want to get rid of those. All right, like I said, her skin is really, really good. So there's really not a lot that needs to be done here. Okay, but I'm going to get rid of all those. All right. This mole on her neck, I'm going to get rid of. That one, and that one. All right, they're part of her. All right. So they're going to end up staying there, but I want to minimize it. Okay. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay. So obviously, if you look at this, it looks really, really strange because normally we would see the little wrinkles under the eyes and things like that. All right. But like this, it's a little bit much. All right. Once I get rid of them, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the opacity and I'm going to reduce my opacity. Now, how much do I reduce? It's going to depend on the person and how you lit that particular one. But I find in general, anywhere between 30 to 50% tends to be a good number. So I'm going to start off at 50%. All right. And if you want, you can check to see. All right. Maybe 50% might be a little bit too much. Let's try 40. All right. And if you're not sure, let's try 30. Nope, 30. We're really starting to really notice them. So let's go back up to 40. Okay. The other way you can do it is if you place your cursor right on the word that says opacity and you click and scrub left and right, you're going to notice that it adjusts that opacity. All right, so you can just scrub back and forth. You're not going to see anything until you release it, but It's a good way of just scrubbing to a number. All right, there we go. There's 39. I release, and then you can see it. You can very easily scrub up. There's 45, and that looks pretty good. 45, all right, looks pretty good. Now, obviously you want to see what it looks like without the check layer, so you can just disable the check layer, okay? And if we toggle the wrinkles layer on and off, you can see how the wrinkles are still there. They're just minimized, all right? So they're not as prominent. All right, makes sense? All right, I'm sure all the ladies in the session right now are going, wow, I need that. Okay. All right. That's pretty much it for all the blemish that removal stuff that I do for this image. Now, like I said, I have an action that does this, and the action that I have actually takes all of these, puts it into a group, all right, and it's called blemish removal. Okay, so now I can just toggle that on and off, and you can see everything that is fixed on the person. Okay, so like I said, not much. This young lady has, you know, beautiful skin, didn't need very much, but you get the gist. Okay.
Can you go over again how you made it to a group?
Oh, sure. Sorry, I did fly through that one, didn't I? Okay. Click and select the top layer, click and select, shift click the bottom layer of what you want grouped, all right? And I use the shortcut key, Control G, Command G, or you can go to layer, group layers, okay? And it will do the same thing, okay? And it's literally just gonna group it into a folder, all right, and then just rename the folder whatever it is that you want. I usually make it very content relative to what that group does. In this case, this group is just about removing blemishes, all right? So I call it my blemish removal, okay? All right. Now, I'm not going to go over how to make actions. I have other videos that do actions, but I suggest that once you've done a couple of these workflows and you see exactly how you want your workflow to go ahead and create actions for these little sections. So you'll create an action for your blemish removal. You'll create an action for your dodge and burn, and so on, okay? All right. Any questions on anything about the blemish removal? We good? All right. The next step that I want to do is I want to do some contouring to the face. And for this, we're going to use dodging and burning. All right. Now, the terms dodging and burning come from the old film days, the old printmaking days, where a slide or a negative was placed in front of a light. The light shone down on your paper that you're going to print on. Okay. And you can manipulate the darkness and lightness of very specific areas in the print by either blocking the light in small areas, which is called burning, or blocking everything but a small section, which is called dodging, okay? And what this did is it brightened or darkened very specific areas of the print. Excuse me. Oy. Getting dry in here. All right. So the digital tools, they're still called dodge and burn, but it's obviously done digitally. And in short, all it is brightening or darkening the values of very specific areas. All right. There are a million and one ways of dodging and burning. Okay, and I'm probably gonna, I'll show you two methods that I use. Okay, one is, again, a really simple, down and dirty method that it gets the job done without a lot of fuss. It's not a high-end technique, but for our purposes, it fits the bill. Okay, again, we're retouching headshots. They're not high fashion shots that are going in a magazine. All right, so we don't need to spend, you know, an hour here. Okay, all right. So for that, what I want to do is I want to, where is my, here it is. Okay, let me close this up. All right, we're going to take a lesson here from the cosmetic industry. The makeup artist. Okay, makeup artists use makeup to contour people's faces, right? To give shape and definition to very specific areas. All right, and if we look here, all right, you can see how here we go. Makeup is applied to the skin in tones that are either darker than or lighter than the skin. Okay, in this particular case, they're using makeup. All right, we're going to be using the digital equivalent of using light and shadow. Okay. But what I want you to notice is that they are very specific to where they place these areas of contour and highlight. All right. Here's another example. Oh, that's a small one. Here's another example. All right. You'll notice that a lot of the light areas are in the central part of the mask of the face, where the shadow areas tend to be more towards the outside part, underneath the cheekbones, underneath the nose, along the side of the nose to give it a little bit of shape and definition. All right. So we're going to take a lesson from the makeup artist in that respect. Okay. Here's an illustration that breaks it down. The image on the left is for shadows. The image on the right is for highlights. Okay, so you can see how the shadows is towards the outside, the highlights are towards the center. Okay, all right. We're going to take that premise and we're going to apply it digitally here. All right, so for this, we are going to use one of my favorite tools, and that is the curves adjustment. Okay, so obviously you probably already deduced that we're going to need two of them, one for our shadows and one for our highlights, right? Okay, so we're going to create two. One, two. All right, we're going to call this one shadows, and we're going to call the second one highlights. Make sense? Okay. All right. So shadows. What are shadows? Shadows is an underexposure of our true tone value. All right. So in this case, we're dealing with the skin of her face. All right. There's a certain value to her skin tone. All right. So anything that is shadow is going to be darker than her true tone skin tone. Okay. So that means we're just going to take our curves adjustment and we're going to bring it down. All right. How much down? This is where it's going to get a little subjective. Okay. But for now, we're going to go a little bit on the darker side. We can always adjust it later. That's the beauty about these layers, is that you can fine tune it after the fact. We are working non-destructively. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to darken it up quite a bit. Okay. How much? Well, you know, again, we'll figure it out. Okay. All right. I've darkened it and it's darkened the entire image. All right. I don't want to darken the entire image. I want to darken very specific areas. All right. So for now, what I want to do is I want to hide the effect. All right. So we're going to go to our mask. Okay. Make sure that the mask is selected. You can see that it's got the little white corners here. Okay. And we're going to invert it. All right. So white shows everything. Black hides everything. All right. So we can do it a couple of ways. We can use a shortcut key, Control I, Command I for you Mac people. Or if you have your Properties tab open, all right, you can see this little symbol here. Okay. If it's not there, go to Windows, down to Properties, make sure that's checked. Okay. With the mask selected, all right, if you select the icon for the curves adjustment, you're going to see the actual curve. As soon as we click on the mask, it changes. All right, and you're going to see a button there that says invert. All right, we're going to click on that. Excuse me. All right, and you're going to notice that it reverted back to its original state. Okay.
Does this question,
Yeah.
does that change the histogram at all for good?
Yes, anything you change, it's going to alter the histogram.
So in the curve, I did not see the histogram change. All this saw was a curve change, but no histogram change.
All right. Well, oh, hold on. Oh, you know what? You're right. Good question. I don't think I've ever noticed that. I don't think I've ever noticed that. Oh, wait a minute.
You know why? Because it probably doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay. You know what? There's a little symbol here. I don't think I've ever paid attention to this. To be honest, when I'm working in Photoshop, I don't look at the histogram. I only look at the histogram when I'm in Lightroom. All right, but there's this little symbol here. All right. If you click on it, you're going to notice that the histogram does shift. Right, and if I click it back, it shifts, but it brings up that symbol again. So I don't know. Uncache refresh. Yeah, I don't know. Good question though. Good question. I'll have to look into that. But when I click on that little symbol there in the corner, it does change the histogram. It does shift. So, but technically, it should change. All right. Anything you change to the image, that histogram should reflect those changes.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So we've prepped our shadows. All right, which is our burn layer. Okay. We're going to do the same thing with our highlights layer. We're going to take our curve and we're going to make it brighter. All right. We want to make things brighter than. Okay. Now, we obviously don't need to go too much brighter. All right. But again, because this is something that can be adjusted after the fact, at this point, it doesn't matter. We just want to make it brighter, okay? A noticeable brightness, okay? All right, we're going to come back. Make sure that we select our mask and we invert it, and we now go back to being a regular, the regular view, okay? So like before, what we can do is we can click on the first, shift click on the second one, Control G, all right, or select group. We're going to make it into a group, and I'm going to call this face D and B, face, dodge, and burn. All right, because this is specifically just for the face and the neck area, nothing else. Okay. All right. Keep in mind those illustrations that I showed you for cosmetics. All right, we're going to, let me go ahead and expand this. All right, we're going to go first to the shadows. All right, actually, it doesn't matter what order. You're going to be doing both, but it doesn't matter. Make sure that you have the mask selected. We're going to select a hard round brush. All right, meaning there's absolutely no softness to it. Okay, make sure that white is our foreground color. All right, if it's black, all right, all you got to do is hit the X key. The X will toggle between both. All right, if they're not black and white, just go ahead and click on that little icon right above it, the little black and white. All right, that will reset. Okay, you could also hit that little double arrow, that will switch it back and forth, but I like the letter X because it allows me to very quickly flip between one and the other. Okay, all right, so make sure white is your foreground color, and what we're going to do is we are going to create some lines. Oh, wait. See, I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. Your tools property at the top of the page, or at the top of the program, all right, right at the top, you're going to see that mine says opacity 20, flow 1%. All right. This is the leftover from a brush that I used earlier. We want to make sure that opacity is at 100% and flow is at 100%. Again, you can just click and drag on the label. That's going to, allow you to scroll back and forth. The other thing you can do, if on your row of numbers, any of those numbers is going to give you a opacity of that percentage to the nearest tenths. All right, so if you hit the number 1, it'll give it 10%. If you hit the number 5, it'll be 50%. The number 8 will be 80%, and so on. Okay. If you do shift number, it's going to modify your flow. So shift 5 will make it 50%. Shift 0 will make it 100. So we want to make it sure that it's 100 and 100. Okay. And now with the white on the mask, I am going to paint some lines that are going to resemble the lines that we saw when we looked at those images of the makeup being contoured. Okay. So all these areas that I'm painting is where I want to darken the skin tone. All right. So I want a little bit of definition. All right, I messed up. Control Z to undo. All right, I'm going to draw a line underneath the chin just to give the chin a little bit more definition. Maybe draw a couple lines here and maybe a line here just to give a little bit of shadow contour on the edges. Okay, let's give a little bit right on the cheeks there, on the jawline rather. Okay, and just like we saw with the makeup, I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller, And I'm going to go from the inside of the eye and down one side of the nose, and then up and over on the other side, just like that. Okay? The final one that I like to do, and again, this is all subjective, all right? It's subjective, all right? The nose you should contour, all right? But here, what I like to do is, because I like very smiley people, I'm going to go ahead and accent this smile. So these smile lines are going to get a little bit, and I'm going to do under the nose, just like that. Okay? Everybody see that? Finally, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to do one little pass underneath the lip. Okay? Just to give the underside of the lip a little definition. All right? If somebody has what's called a harder face, something with more angular planes to their face, they tend to be a lot easier to define. All right. So some people will have these very noticeable planes on the side of their temple at the top. If that's the case, you can go ahead and accent them. And in her case, she doesn't really need it, so I'm not gonna bother with that. Okay. That's pretty. Yes.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Okay, is this a good way? A lot of times I'm taking pictures of people outdoors. You know, you're in the woods, you have a sunny day, you know, what's going to happen. What you're doing here with highlights and shadows, is this a good thing to do with taking care of something that's too shadowy on a person?
It can, yes. Yes, absolutely. This technique is more about contouring a face. So this works better when maybe the light on the face is a little bit too neutral or too flat. Okay. What this does is we're artificially creating that roundness.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So that's all we're doing for our shadow. I'm going to go ahead and jump up to our highlights, and we're going to do something similar. And if you remember from the previous example, most of these were in the center part of the face. All right. So again, this is what I do. You may find a slightly different technique. The button of the nose. All right. And that looks a little soft. Let me go back to this, and I'm going to boost up that a little bit. I'll make it a little bit brighter. Okay. Come back to our mask. All right. I'm going to do a line down the bridge of the nose. All right. So the bridge of the nose, that's the highest part of the face. So we want to make sure that that's what's receiving the most light. Okay. Let me make the brush a little bit larger. Some people will do like a stripe across the top of the cheeks. Okay. Me, I tend to do more like a chevron. Okay. That's my preference. I will do the chin. Okay. And depending on the person's facial structure, I might even accent the smile a little bit more by putting some highlight here. I will put a dot right in the middle top lip. And I will also do a dot on the high part of the brow. All right. So right there and right there. Okay. And then I will do usually some stripes here on the forehead. And if you notice, they kind of make an arrow to kind of just bring it in. So we're going to use this as kind of like a directional to just pull our eye downwards. Okay. All right. Depending on how much light is on the neck, you know, I might do something to accent a little part of the neck, but that one tends to be on a per need basis. All right. But everything else here is pretty much what I do across the board for everyone. All right. The thing is, you're going to be following the specific physical attributes of the person you photographed. Everybody's face is different. And, you know, their angle of view may be a little bit different. You want to make sure that they are applied appropriately. Okay. All right. So we have these ugly lines. What do we do with it? Okay. At this point, and this is a neat little trick that I learned. I'm going to go back to my shadows. All right. And if we look at our properties tab, we're going to see two sliders. One that says density, which should be at 100%. And the next one that says feather, which should be at 0. All right. And it's the feather one that we are going to adjust. And again, kind of like the wrinkle removal, I find that anywhere between 30 and 50 works really, really well. All right, so what we can do is we can just scrub this, all right, and right about, or you can just go ahead and type in the number 50, okay? And if we toggle the little eyeball here, this little eyeball, if we toggle that on, we can see how it darkens it. All right. And you may say, okay, that's not quite enough. All right. So let's make it 40. And you're going to notice that it gets a little bit darker. All right. It's a subtle burn. All right. It's a subtle burn. Okay. All right. Or you may say it's 30. Okay. The other thing you can adjust is you can go back to your curve and you can adjust it even further. All right. Salt and pepper to taste. Okay. Once you've done that, we can go ahead and go to our highlights and do the exact same thing. Okay. So let's go to 50%. Toggle it on. Oh, that looks pretty good. Okay. Let's try 40. All right, that might be a little bit too much. Let's try 45. 45. Toggle it back and forth. All right, I don't know if you guys can see it on the video. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and collapse that group. And if I turn on and off the entire group, we can see how that the shadows is a little bit too much. Let's bring that up. All right. Turn it on, off, on and off. All right. You can see how that really shapes her face. Okay. Any questions on that technique? Super simple. Okay. Again, what's up?
That was absolutely great.
Looks good.
Let you know, when you're doing one like this, you might say, big deal. All right. But when you're doing an entire office where you have 15, 20 people, and you got to deliver 15 to 20, or in my case, 30 to 40 images, because I normally give 2 with my headshot packages. All right. That's a lot of images to process in a very short time. You want to be able to really, you know, get them out without having to spend all day editing, right? Okay, so quick and dirty, okay? All right, so that's one dodge and burn method, which uses curves, all right? I'm gonna walk you through another one, which I tend to use more for other areas besides the face, all right, which is more of a traditional dodging and burning, all right. And the premise for this is we're going to use a layer adjustment that allows us to darken or lighten depending on how much black or white we add to that layer. All right. So for this, we're going to use one of the layer mental block layer settings that allows us to use our midtones effectively. All right. So for this, what we're going to do is we're going to create a blank layer. All right. And I'm just going to rename this DNB for dodge and burn. Okay. And we're going to go edit, fill. All right. And we're going to say, all right, where it says contents, if we drop that down, it gives you a bunch of options. We're going to go 50% gray. All right, 50% gray. Okay. But here is where we're going to make another change. The blend mode that we're going to use is linear light. Linear light. All right. What this means, all right, is we're starting with a base of 50% gray. And with this particular blend mode, it renders 50% gray completely invisible. All right, you're not going to see any change to the image with that 50% gray. All right, so if I said okay, all right, oops, linear light, there we go. Okay, if I toggle that on and off, you're going to notice nothing changes on the image. Okay, but if I take, I'm going to select a soft round brush. I have the opacity at 100 and my flow at 100. Okay, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, and if I take black and I paint on it, you're going to notice that it's going to make everything black. If I change it to white and oops, let's change it to white, and I paint on it, it literally dodges everything to white. Okay. If I select an opacity of, let's say, 10%, okay, and I select black, every time I make a pass, it's going to add a 10% of black to that image. And if you notice, every time I make a pass, it's making those areas darker and darker and darker, right? Obviously, the areas that are already dark get really dark, and the areas that are a little bit on the lighter side, not so dark, all right? You need to really start building up in order to get anything noticeable, okay? Now, we're going to take that premise, all right, edit, fill, 50% gray. Oh, come on. Edit, fill. Okay. All right. We're gonna take that premise, and we need to control how much black or white pigment we apply to this layer. All right. So if you notice, I used the opacity. Okay. But I find that a better control is the flow. All right. If I keep my opacity at 100, but I keep my flow at like 1%, all right, maybe 2%. As I draw, as I keep hovering and going over, it's applying that little tiny bit of black. Okay. So that allows me to very quickly add darkness or lightness without too much effort and without really overdoing it. okay? In combination with that, we might say, all right, well, I want a little bit better control, all right? So if you're not too sure, bring the opacity down, all right? But with that flow at 1%, it's going to allow you to have a little bit more control over your dodging and burning, okay? So every time I make a pass, all right, it's going to make that a little bit darker, a little bit darker, a little bit darker, okay? Make sense? Okay. Let me back that up. All right. And the same thing goes if I use white, all right? All right. It's going to allow me to brighten things up, okay? So that's the setup. Nice soft brush, very, very low flow, relatively medium to low opacity to get you started. You can change that as you get more experience, okay? Just realize too low, you're gonna have to really work at painting these highlights in, okay? All right, so now we have to make a decision of where we want to darken and where we want to lighten, okay? So in this case, what I would like to do is I would like to see a little bit of shine on her hair. All right, so with white as my foreground color, okay, I'm going to make the size of my brush appropriate, okay? And I'm going to look for the natural highlights that are already present in the image, and I'm just going to enhance those, all right? So we have some highlights here, all right? And I'm just going to start painting those in, all right? 50% is too low for me. I got to go up, okay? And I'm just going to start painting some highlights in, all right? Maybe a little bit here, all right? Definitely where there's already highlights, all right? Maybe here and here, here, definitely here, all right? Now, if you recall to a previous lessons, all right, especially the ones where I said, you know, moving sliders a little bit, then a little bit, then a little bit, how your eyes get used to those small changes, all right? Because we are painting in small changes at a time, our eyes get used to those small changes really, really quickly as we are working. So occasionally, stop. Go to the side, your layers panel, and turn on and off the visibility on that panel to check what you're doing, all right? So here you can see how prominent those highlights have become. All right, because the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to overdo it to the point where you step away, come back, and you look at your image and go, oh my God, you know, they're neon, okay? So, all right, every so often, turn them off, turn them on, turn them off, turn them on, okay? Okay, now, let me sit down here for a second. This is where we can use it to fix certain problems with clothing, all right? We can go into like areas, her blouse doesn't have a lot of wrinkles, so it's not too bad. But if somebody has a lot of wrinkles, you can go ahead and kind of dodge those wrinkles out a little bit, okay? Oof, that's really terrible, all right? If you make a mistake, you can double click on your, in this case, my white, select 50% brightness, all right? And then you can just paint over that area and it will return you back to where you were originally, okay? You can't use the eraser tool. If you use the eraser tool, it's just going to create a hole in that in that mask, all right? And if I change my, you can see how It literally made a hole. Okay. All right. So let me get rid of that. All right. So B, reset black and white. Okay, X to toggle. All right, and we can go ahead and use that as needed to kind of dodge and burn. This takes a little bit of finesse. All right, it takes practice. All right, after a while, you'll be able to really work wonders. Okay, now I wouldn't suggest this technique for getting rid of heavy wrinkles. There are other techniques for that. I'm not going to go over those today, but all right, this is a great way of just adding a little bit of pop to your image. All right, you might want to maybe, add a little bit of emphasis to parts of, the clothing. Let's see, where are we? Okay. Linear light. Okay. All right. Any questions on this type of dodging and burning? All right. It's fairly simple. Yeah.
Is this what we would use for the teeth and the white of the eyes too?
No, actually, I have different technique. We're going to do that right now. Okay.
Oh.
So, all right. So this dodging and burning, this would be, when you need to target very specific areas that need a little bit more emphasis or a little less. All right. Okay. So if you want, you can take what you did for the face and you can take this layer, you can group it together, call it dodging and burning. I usually don't bother because this is just kind of like one of those standalone layers. It doesn't bother me having it hang out there. Okay. Now we go to making the eyes pop and correcting anything with the teeth. All right. So let me go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. All right. And we're going to be using two different techniques. One we already covered. All right. What we did with the face dodge and burn, we're going to do this. We're going to use the same technique, except we're going to use it for the eyes. All right. So for this, we're going to need a curves adjustment. All right. Make sure I'm all right. Curves adjust. Oh, one too many. And I normally call this iris because that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be touching up the irises. Okay. Now, if you.
Is this the same thing you use for red eye?
No. Well, yeah, you probably could use something similar for red eye. Red eye, I usually just paint whatever's red. I usually paint out.
Okay, that's a great, yes.
That's much easier. This is just to give a little bit of a glint to the eye. All right. Now, again, this is a very beautiful girl. She's got awesome eyes that are already sparkly to begin with. All right. So we're going to make them a little bit more sparkle. All right. But this, for people who have darker eyes, this can really make their eyes pop. Okay. And the way this works, let me get my drawing. If we were to look at the side view of the eye, all right, we have the lens of the eye, and then we have the iris, okay? The iris is kind of a depression in that curve of the eye, and the lens kind of projects outward, okay? So when we have light coming from high, all right, whether it's natural sunlight or studio lights, okay, we're going to have light that hits the bottom part of the iris more than the top part. All right, so the top part tends to be a little bit in shade. The bottom tends to really get more of the light because of that curve, right? Make sense? So that's what we're going to enhance. All right, so we're going to go to our curves adjustment. We're going to take that and we're going to just bring it up. All right, and I'm going to look at the iris, and I just want kind of like one stop brighter. Okay, I don't really want to blow out too much of the detail. I just want to give it a little bit of pop. Okay, then we're going to go to our mask and we're going to go ahead and invert it. Okay, because we want to paint in just very specific areas. So I'm going to get a nice soft round brush. I'm going to size it down. All right, now if you notice, I have my flow and my opacity still set from my dodge and burn. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and reset this. But I'm going to set my opacity down to about 10% because I want to kind of build this up a little bit. Okay, I want to make my brush just large enough that it gets into the color areas of the iris, but not onto the skin of the lid. Okay, all right, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little half moon on the bottom part of the eye. All right, so a little half moon. All right, and because I'm at 10%, I'm going to brush more in the lowest part and less up onto the sides. Okay, now again, you're making very minor, small changes, so your eyes get used to it. Toggle them off, toggle it on, off, on. You can notice how they pop. Okay, if you want to add a little bit of pop to the natural highlights, you can go ahead and paint that in as well. So toggled off, toggled on. You can see how it's just adding that little bit of sparkle to the bottom part of the iris. All right, and then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, if you're not too sure, go ahead and jack that up a lot. Okay, all right, paint it in. If you get too much on the outside, switch to a black brush and just make sure. Also, let me zoom in. You notice that the edge of the iris is a little bit darker than the middle part. All right, so you might want to remove any of what you just did to that very, very edge. You want to keep what you're painting just to that bottom section. Make sense? Okay, move this over, that natural highlight, really paint that in. Okay, X gives me black, and I'm just going to remove it from that edge and that edge. And if I got anything on that bottom lid, I want to make sure. Now, we are painting reactively to what we're seeing change on our screen. Sometimes this can be very difficult to figure out, did I get what I needed? Here's a good check to make sure, all right, which I use all the time. The backslash on your keyboard, which is towards the top right-hand side, usually at the end of the number line, okay? If you toggle that, it's going to give you a mask overlay, all right? And you can see, all right, let me make sure white. And you can see exactly where you're painting, all right? So if I go at 100% and I do this, you can see exactly where you're applying that effect, okay? So If you're not too sure, all right, go ahead and use that toggle, the backslash, and it'll show you exactly where your mask is. Make sense? Hopefully that's a good tip. Control 0. All right. Mask. Oh, what's this? What the heck happened? Something went wrong here. What the heck? What the? I don't know what I just did, but my face dodge and burn is doing way too much. Okay. Normal? Normal? Opacity, opacity. Okay. I don't know what I did. In all my explanation, I must have done something. Okay. Give me 1 second. Did he? All right. Face, dodge, and burn. There we go. We're gonna go ahead and make that, get rid of that. There we go. Oh, it's still. Again, I don't know what I did. Okay. Ah, the heck. All right, let's just bring that down. Okay. I don't know what I did. I screwed something up when I'm bouncing around all over the place here. Okay. All right. So there's my iris, which is too much. So we're going to go ahead and reduce that down to something a little bit more appropriate. Just give it that little bit of a glint. There we go. All right. Next thing we want to do is correct anything with the teeth. All right. All right. In this case, some people like me, unfortunately, I have very yellow teeth. All right. What we want to do is we want to, again, minimize this effect. Her teeth are pretty darn good. All right. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer. All right, let me go here. And it's a hue saturation layer. We're going to create a new hue saturation layer, which is right here. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring our saturation down about, again, anywhere between 30–40%. All right. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get rid of that yellow color cast. All right. Bring the teeth back to a more natural looking white. Now, if you remove all the color from it, it's going to look a little fake. Okay. So we need some color in there. All right. So 50%. All right. That goes good. All right. And depending on the person's teeth, we might want to take the lightness and bring the lightness up a little bit. Doesn't need much. At the most, maybe 10 points. Okay. And this is general. You can adjust it later. All right. We're going to go to our mask. We're going to invert the mask. All right. With the invert button or Control Command I. Going to pick a nice soft round brush. We want to make the size of the brush appropriate to the area. As you can see, I am very zoomed in. Okay. And with white as my foreground color. All right. White as my foreground color. I'm going to go at opacity 100%, flow at 100%. I'm just going to go ahead and paint in right on the teeth. Okay. Now in this particular image, I'm not seeing any gum line. All right. She has a beautiful smile. It's not what you would call a gummy smile. You know, you'll show a lot of gum. If somebody has a smile where you see some gum line, avoid painting on that gum line. All right. Also avoid painting on the lips. If for any reason you happen to get on the lip, don't worry about it. All right. Just switch your foreground color to black and go ahead and correct those areas. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Any questions on eyes and teeth? Super simple, right? Okay. Now, all of these, all right, yes, it's a single layer adjustment, okay? It really didn't take me much time to do, but you have to remember all the steps. You have to remember desaturate. You have to remember brighten it up a little bit. You need to remember to invert the mask, all right? Rather than trying to remember all that, and you have to remember, changing the label on your layer name. Do this, record it as an action, keep that action handy. That way, at the press of a button, it does all this and you can just go in and make the adjustments. Okay? All right. The final thing that I do, which I'm not going to cover today because it's a little bit more involved, is I will do a little bit of skin softening. There are a couple of techniques to do that. But once you have your action set up for skin softening, all right, which I have and here I have a skin softening action, all right. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and click on that action. It does the required steps, okay. In this case, I'm going to change that to 6, okay. All right, so you can see it did a bunch of different steps very, very quickly, all right? And it set up my mask already ready for me to paint on it. So all I got to do is make sure I have a nice, soft, round brush, okay? I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on her face. Let me close this up, okay? Gonna resize my brush appropriately. I'm going to toggle the backslash so I can see my mask. White as my foreground color. My opacity at 100, my flow at 100. I'm going to go ahead and paint where I need to paint. And these are just the large areas of the skin. All right. I'm going to avoid the eyes. I'm going to avoid anything with a lot of detail. All right. So I'm going to avoid the eyes. I'm going to avoid the mouth. All right. I'm going to avoid the nostril area. I'm just going to keep to the skin. Resize down. Get underneath here. All right. It looks silly. All right, but I can see exactly where my effect is being applied. All right, there's absolutely no guessing as to where I am painting. This is the beauty about check layers. Okay, all right, make it smaller. Paint here, paint here. Once that's done, I can go ahead and toggle that backslash. And it's a very subtle change, all right, but it just smooths out the skin that ever so much, okay? And I'm done.
What did you do to get that?
All right, so in this particular case, what I did is I It's a kind of like a frequency separation skin softening. All right. It's involved. Unfortunately, we don't have the time for me to explain it all. All right. Maybe I'll do it during another Photoshop session. But if you look up skin smoothing with frequency separation, that's all it does. What it does is it separates the color from the texture. Okay. And by softening the texture, we are applying a skin smoothening, all right? Because we're softening all of the texture. That's why we need to avoid things like hair and the eyes, all right? Because we don't want to apply skin smoothening to those areas. So we just want to keep it to the large patches of skin, okay? And that's all it does, okay? And because it's a complex process, by making it into an action, I don't have to remember all the steps. I don't have to take the time to slowly build that layer. I press the button, it does it like that, and I just continue working. Okay? So learn to build actions. Actions are super easy to make. All right. So, all right. Control 0. Let me Control Shift. Let me just put that all into a group so I can toggle it on and off. This is the before. This is the after. Before, after. Oh, one thing I would probably do is here I might add another curves adjustment layer, make it dark, add a gradient. Oops. Make it like this. There we go. All right, and what that does, it adds that grounding down at the bottom. All right, I basically just burned the bottom part of the blouse. Okay. All right, so Control 0, Shift, off, before, after, before, after. Any questions? All right. It's probably a little overdone because of the video, but that's the process. All right. Now, obviously, it took me 2 hours to do all that, but without the explanation and without having to build everything, you can get through this in like 15, 20 minutes.
Now, does Control 0 bring all of those groups all together? It makes it.
Oh, Control
what is it
0.
that-
No, Control 0. All right, let me zoom in. Control 0, all it does is it makes it fit to the screen.
Oh.
That's it. All right, so if you press
How
it,
do you,
yeah.
how do you build all together so it's forward?
Okay, so all right, what you want to do is in your layer stack here, you're going to click on the first, whatever you want in your group. You're going to click on the top part. You're going to come down to the bottom of whatever you want in your group, and you're going to hit Shift, click, and if you notice, everything in between is selected, right? Okay. Once everything is selected, I just used the shortcut key, Control G or Command G, but you can go layer, group layers, and it creates it as a group, and then you can name the group whatever you want. Okay. In this case, I just did it so I can very easily toggle it off and on, just so you see the before and after. Okay. All right. Any questions on anything we covered? I hope I didn't fry too many brains.
There was a lot there.
There
was
is.
a lot
There
there.
is.
To remember.
Amazing.
All right. If we break it down, all right. Let's simplify it. I got rid of blemishes. I added a little bit of contouring by dodging and burning. And then I softened the skin. All I did. All right. It seems like a lot because I had to, slowly explain the entire process,
Mhm.
explain the different layers and how to build them and all that. All right. But once you've done a couple of these, it's going to go like that. Trust me. All right.
I do.
All right. Especially if you take time ahead of time. Take time ahead of time to make the actions for each one of these steps. All right. I'll show you. Let me get. I'm going to undo everything. I'm going to delete it. Okay. Here's my actions. Okay. Actually, here I'm gonna do it. Where's my? All right. I'm going to do it from this thing. Okay. I have my blemish. I have my face dodge and burn. I have my regular dodge and burn. My iris enhance, my teeth whitening, and my skin tone. Oh, nope. Undo, Control Z. That's not the one. I got my skin smooth. Okay, and okay. All right. And unfortunately, they're all out of order because obviously I pressed them all without actually doing any of the work. But I have all my layers right here. Okay. So skin smoothening would come all the way to the top. All right. My face dodge and burn. That would be. All right. Where's my dodge and burn? Iris. And let's see, iris would be here. I really screwed this up, didn't I? Let me do that again. Okay, blemish removal. Okay, I do all my blemish removal. I close that. I got my face dodge and burn. I do that. Okay, I do my regular dodge and burn. Okay, I do my eyes. I do my teeth. Okay, once that's done, all right, I will go ahead and do my skin smoothening. Okay, and okay, all right. And in the meantime, I will also be removing this check layer. All right, I think that's the only check layer I have in that process. Okay. Some portraits may require me to do some heavy duty wrinkle removal. I have a process for that. I didn't get into it today because it's very involved. All right, but I have a process for that. I would probably do it right in here with my frequency frequency separation. Okay, and this here, let me all right, that's my color information, all right, otherwise known as the low frequency, and this is my high frequency or my detail information. Okay, and that just creates my frequency separation, and I can work on the two parts individually. Okay, again, that's a little bit more advanced, but I have a step that if I need it, I insert it into my workflow. Okay. So what I showed today is just a very typical, very standard workflow for getting a finished product out very, very quickly. All right, without, you know, a lot of effort. Okay. Time is money. Okay. All right. I'll be posting this video to Facebook. If you need to refer back to it, feel free. All right. If anybody has any specific questions about anything, you know, feel free to hit me up on Facebook or send me an email. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
My pleasure. All right. I don't have anything oh, wait a minute. Do I? No, I don't have anything prepped for next week. If anybody wants to come into the studio for next week, hit me up. Let me know. You know, I'll be more than happy
I'll be
to.
in Thailand.
You'll be what? In Thailand?
In Thailand, yeah.
Oh.
I'm leaving Monday.
Hey, you got room in your luggage for me?
Yeah.
I don't eat much.
Yeah. But if you're not under 50 pounds, sorry.
Damn. I tried. Well,
Yeah.
take lots of great pictures and bring them back and show it to us.
Okay.
All right. Okay, guys, we definitely went well over time, but I think it was worth it, don't you?
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doc.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you.
All right, guys. As always, stay safe. Let me get back to my. All right, yeah, my studio. I got one job still hanging over my head that I got to finish, so I'll be tackling it the rest of this week. But like I said, if anybody wants to come in for next Monday, hit me up. We'll make something come alive. Right?
Okay.
Thank you once again for
Thank
joining
you,
me. Thank you to all my Patreon members. You make this so well worth it. I appreciate you, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, guys.
Have a good one.
Stay safe.
For watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.